welcome to Relish Books. Today I am going to be reviewing a book that is not a classic, that will never be a classic, and is probably not very well known or very well read. It had been my plan today to review House of Mirth by Edith Wharton, but it's just not as gripping as those Jane Austen novels, and I have not finished it yet. I'm about halfway, so hopefully by next week I'll have that done and can comment on it. But I still want to make a video today, and I've just been thinking about Bridge of Clay by Markus Zusak, so I thought I'd talk about it some. It's a very talkable book. I feel like for anybody who's read it, they'll understand it can be very controversial. And when I think of this book, my thoughts just go around and around and around because I have so many mixed feelings on it. So I'm just going to tell you some of the things that I think. First part, I'm going to try to keep everything very general. Second part, I'm going to give a warning for anybody who wants to turn off the video, and then I am going to discuss some finer plot points and give some stuff away. So it is going to be some spoilers later on in the video, but I will give a warning of that. So first of all, this book is special in a few ways. Obviously, I read it because I am a huge fan of The Book Thief. It's one of my all-time favorite books. I did not read The Book Thief until a good few years after it had come out. Like, it wasn't super new. And at that time, Markus Zusak was still working on Bridge of Clay, and it was a good few years before it was published after that. I believe he was working on this book for like 10 years. So he is very meticulous in his particular style, which is a very interesting style. I'm going to talk about that some too. But something that's special about this book, I have a lot of problems with it. I'm going to say that up front. And ultimately, it's not a book I would really recommend to people. But it is the only book I have ever read that I can remember. And it's not a short book. It's not a super easy book. It's intense and emotional and has a lot of difficult stuff. But it's the only book that I have ever read, gotten to the last page, finished it, sat there looking at the last page for a minute, then turned back to the beginning and started it over again and read it all the way through again. Part of that was because I just felt like I hadn't absorbed everything. There's so much going on in this book. But the real reason is the relationships. Markus Zusak, for all that he might fancy himself a remarkable writer, and he definitely is in some ways, his strong point is his characters. And it's a unique way. It's not something that's like any other writer. He is unique. You care about these people so deeply. He has the ability to make you care really deeply about really not good people. Really just kind of trashy, everyday, not great people. And you deeply care about them. And not just like, we should love everybody. It's not even like that. It's like you care about them personally, individually. Their qualities are endearing to you, even though they're kind of like, these boys are a mess. And yet you're there with them and you feel for them so deeply. And I feel like it's because the author cares about the characters so deeply. He is an author who, if he inserts himself in any way, it's in that he so obviously cares about his characters. As he's writing it, you get the sense that he's telling you, through the way that he's describing these people, that he would just do anything for them. That when bad things happen to them, he would do anything to avoid that happening. That he would, bleed and die for these characters, basically. And that he would just give anything for them. Which is interesting because, they're characters that he has himself created, but it doesn't feel like it doesn't really feel like ego, like, oh, these are my characters and I'm showing off my characters. It doesn't feel that way at all. It feels like these are people that he knows and cares about. And it doesn't feel like, there are times when the way authors write about characters, it's like they're telling you how to feel. It's like they're telling you, feel this way about a character, care about this character because of this and this and this. And anytime that a reader feels that like being pushed on them, usually the reaction is to go the other way, to be like, okay, well, now I don't care about this character. But it doesn't feel, it's not the same with him. He is being pushy in a sense, but it's more like he's begging you. He's not being like, oh, look, feel about my character in this way. It's like he's begging you to care about them. He's like, please look at my characters, love these people. And you do. You can't help it. At least I can't. I love the characters in this book. The relationships between the 5 brothers, I'm going to say 4 brothers because Clay, even though the book is narrated by Matthew, the oldest brother, which I think is an interesting and really good choice, Clay is the central figure, and he suffers from like main character syndrome, and he is really boring, and you don't really care about him. At least I sure didn't, but that doesn't really matter because everybody else cares about him so much, and you feel like, well, I should care for these other characters who are overlooked, you know? So yeah, and obviously he has a very, deep, dark secret that's making him all serious. So, those are the things that I like about the book, is the relationships, 4 brothers in particular, Matthew, Henry, Rory, Tommy, and the fact that, they're 5 brothers, they don't get a ton of individual, like, a lot of time, but they're very distinct. They work really well together. It's just a really fun family dynamic. The other thing that I really like about it is there's a lot of different timelines in this book. There's a lot of different plot lines. There's honestly way too much going on. This shouldn't even work, but it kind of somehow does. There's so much going on. All kinds of different plot lines, backstories. You get the childhood of both the parents. You get the father's first love interest, and then the parents' relationship, and then you get kind of the whole backstory of the girl that Clay is in love with. You get Matthew's romance. You get just all kinds of plot lines are going on here. But the one that I particularly like, if we're looking at like past plot lines, is the mother and father's relationship. It is really sweet. It feels really real. Feels very real life, while at the same time being exceptional. They have a really beautiful, deep relationship that also feels real, and I really loved that. So those are the good things. Now to get into some of the reasons that I would not recommend the book to people. For one thing, The Book Thief, as much as I don't really like this classification, is considered a young adult novel, and it does have a lot of language, but it's mostly milder and like crude stuff. Bridge of Clay has a lot of language, and it's a lot stronger. Yeah, there's a lot. This is just how the brothers talk, how a lot of people talk, which is maybe realistic, and it does characterize them. Markus Zusak is definitely intentional with every word, and he uses it to define his people, but I still don't believe that's necessary because, like I kind of mentioned before, you only notice it when it's there. You definitely would never notice it or think about it really if it wasn't there. You wouldn't be like, oh, this doesn't feel realistic that they're not talking this way. When you can write good dialogue. And he really can. His dialogue is really good for the most part. But yeah, just a lot of language. And again, it doesn't, like in The Book Thief, I've talked about how it doesn't bother me as much in his writing, in that it does feel intentional and that he is like purposely using it to tell you about his characters. But in this one, it's just too much. It's really a ridiculous amount. It feels kind of sloppy. And yeah. I have not read his first book. I think it's called I Am the Messenger. I've like picked it up before and flipped through it, and it just did not look good. And I've kind of excused it before because I was like, oh, well, it's a first attempt novel. That's why. But some of the problems in that book definitely come through. And his massive amounts of language are one. So a couple of the other things, and now I'm going to get into the spoilers. So if you ever plan on reading this book, even though I definitely would give some strong warnings, yeah, go ahead and turn off the video at this point because I'm going to talk about some big giveaways. So kind of the main thing about the book, Clay has this deep, dark secret, and if you're at all perceptive, I feel like you can guess at it. I read this book a few years ago. Quite a few years ago now, I guess. And I was kind of approaching it with maybe a bit of a forced, in a sense, I did not want to see what it was leading up to. I didn't want to see what it was hinting at. And so it took me a bit of a while to catch on. And even though it's pretty clear, it kind of skirts around it. It doesn't give you super graphic details or anything. It is very clear what happens. Basically, the mother has cancer, and a large part of the book they're dealing with this. And they deal with they're a strong, really loving family. They deal with it in a really neat way. She's also just always portrayed as such a strong, ungiving up person. I felt like this really went, and also deeply caring about her family. I feel like this really went against her character, but at the end of a few years, and I have not felt what it's like to be in that position. So, maybe excuse her and put the responsibility on others. But at the end of that time, she wants to die, and she asks her husband to help her. So basically an assisted suicide. And he won't do it. And so Clay does it. And he's very young at this point. Like, I don't remember the exact age, but I want to say like 13 maybe, 12, 13. He's really young. And it's not that I mind so much. Again, I feel like it goes against the mother's character. This wouldn't be necessarily like a problem for the novel if it was dealt with in the right way, Deaths are often a very large part of stories, murders even, suicides. These are part of stories, part of plot. But the way that it's handled is what's odd. Kind of the whole book is around this, and Clay has this massive weight. He's weighed down by this. None of the rest of the family knows except the father. The 4 brothers don't know about it for most of the book. That's why it's like this secret that he has. And just the way that it's dealt with is strange, because it's like he has this guilt, and the father has guilt. Like, I don't know if it's so much that the father can't live with the thought that his son did this, which is also very reasonable to think, or if it's more that he had guilt that his son was able to do what he wasn't strong enough to do. That's kind of how it's made out a bit. So he abandons them. He just can't deal with it. After his wife's death, who he was, deeply in love with, and then the way that happened. So he abandons the family, and of course only Clay knows why. The 4 other brothers, to them, he just like disappeared on them. But the way it's dealt with is what I really don't like, because even though Clay has this weight that's totally natural and a person would, it's portrayed like he had the strength to do the right thing, that this was the right thing in this situation, and that he has this strength and nobleness and greatness of character because he was able to do this. I could be wrong in some of the ways I'm reading into this, but the way that he's held up throughout the book, I really feel like that's what it's saying. It refers to him at one point as the murdering savior. Just stuff like that. It doesn't really, other than just his guilt about it, it doesn't really dwell on kind of the horror of that, the horror of what he actually did. And it wasn't like in a, I mean, death is never nice, but it wasn't in a nice way. She had lived a lot longer than they thought she would, and she was very close to death at the point that this happened. So it was kind of like, what is the point in the first place? And it wasn't like a painless death. That's the other thing. It's like, if you want to escape a painless death with a death that you choose, that one would never be my choice. I think Clay shut up the garage and left the car running and then put her in the garage. So she died of carbon monoxide poisoning. So that's super unpleasant. Her family had been there for her, were taking care of her, loving her. You know, she could have passed away surrounded by them. And then there was this. That's then this undignified, that puts that on her child. That's the thing that really bothers me. As much as I can't imagine her asking her husband to do this, to ask someone who loves you, who you love, to do something like that, and then to live with that, to have your child do it, I can't imagine. No matter how much you might want something, to put that kind of thing on someone, she's held up as the best of them, as a great person. I just can't. That doesn't work for me, that she would do that. If she got to a point where she wanted to die, I think that's 100% reasonable, that you would feel like that in that situation. You'd just be so tired and exhausted and miserable. I totally, that makes perfect sense in the story. And if she got to the point where, maybe her mind's breaking down, if she wanted to, it'd be reasonable, it'd be understandable. I'm not commenting on the right or wrong of it, but it'd be more understandable if, she took her own life, which she still would have been capable of at that point. But to ask a family member to do it, I don't know. It's really disturbing, and the way that the book deals with it, it could still have been a powerful story, dealing with that same topic, but the way it deals with it, lifting it up as a noble thing, I think is really disturbing, and I really have a problem with that. So that's the main thing, and there's no getting away from it, because that is what the book is built around. That's the central plot point, the climax of everything. So that's why I would not recommend this book to anybody. I think it's interesting to read. It's interesting to think about. I've thought about it so much. Again, I read it again right away. But it just kind of destroys everything. All the beauty, all the meaningful moments. You just can't look at them the same anymore after that. And there are some other things, unfortunately, as well. Again, things that are glorified that are not good things, that are then being lifted up and treated with, wonderful, wonderful things. So Clay, the girl that Clay's in love with, also dies. She is a jockey. She's learning to be a jockey, and she's thrown from a horse the day after they had slept together the night before for the first time. And they're 16. They're like 16. They do the thing. She dies the next day, and Clay feels like responsible because he feels like she's such a good writer. She must have been distracted by this. That's the only reason she died. Blah, 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 blah. So now he feels responsible for that, too. And yet the deed of what they did is held up as like this beautiful and glorious thing. And of course it is a beautiful and glorious thing in the proper place, but they're really young. They do this, and yeah, it's just treated like it was a wonderful thing. Which is just, that's not as unusual. Obviously that kind of thing is in books a lot. It wasn't really something that I was necessarily expecting from Markus Zusak, having only read The Book Thief, which I felt like moral-wise is really good, and really beautiful on so many levels. I also think it's ironic that Markus Zusak writes this book and he tries to ennoble the idea of ending your life when The Book Thief is all about the sacredness of life. It's narrated by Death. It's all about Death being amazed and astounded at the resilience of humans, what they're capable of overcoming in the face of death and all kinds of difficulties. So I really feel like this is kind of an opposite take to The Book Thief, and unfortunately has to kind of change your opinion of the author a bit. I still love The Book Thief, and the books are so different, I don't like compare them. You can take them on their own for sure, but I will say, if you love The Book Thief, don't read Bridge of Clay. There's a lot of beautiful things in it, but he just kind of throws all that away, in my opinion. Yeah, there's so many beautiful scenes, so many things that I love about it. One thing that I enjoyed so much, all the references to the Iliad and the Odyssey. Super, super fun. I am not that much of a fan of the Iliad and the Odyssey, but I wanted to be after reading this book, to be able to be as excited about all the characters and stories. It really plays into the book in a really fun way. So that's one more good thing. Something that's fun. Again, a lot of the plot lines are really good. The mother, Penelope, her whole story up to the unfortunate end, is really good. Michael, the father, his story is really good. It's really, really interesting. Again, there's so much going on, but yeah, if it wasn't for those main central points, it could have been a beautiful, beautiful novel. Also, Clay building the bridge, I know it's like symbolic, but he does build a literal bridge, and that didn't really do anything for me. I didn't really see the point of that. As a symbolic thing, I felt like it was way too much, and as a literal thing, it was also too much. I was kind of like, they're building an actual bridge, and I don't really see how that plays into it. It just felt like it was a thing that he put in. Another thing Markus Zusak does, he'll put all kinds of momentous significance on all kinds of little details. The significance like of the clothespins, and things like that throughout the book. It's just too much sometimes. It's kind of like, okay, I get symbolism, I get that some objects bring back memories, whatever, but it's over the top the way he gives such great, awful meaning to these ordinary things. Like, yes, you can give meaning to ordinary things, but he just kind of flies away with it. Anyway, those are some thoughts on this book. Yeah, very, very mixed feelings, but overall, I can't really like it. Um, but, I think I am glad that I've read it because I like thinking about stuff. And yeah, some really great characters. Um, so yeah. Anyway, I will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.